It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Ed Willett. Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since I've been on.
Yeah, we looked it up. It was September of 23, so 18 months or so. Yeah,
time flies.
Something like that. And I see on your sheet you've been working on Shapers of the World. You're up to Volume 5 now. Is that correct?
Yep, Volume 5. It'll be the last one in this series, but it's been quite the run. Over 100 authors that I've published in these anthologies. So, sort of sorry to see it end, but also glad. 5 just seemed like a nice. Well, it's not a round number, but it just seemed like a nice number to wrap it up with. So yeah, it just came out.
Well, so explain the premise of the whole thing. That it's not just you, right?
Yeah, it's all based on my podcast. Back in 2018, I started a podcast called The Worldshapers, and for the first 4 or 5 years, really, it was entirely focused on science fiction and fantasy authors talking about their creative process. So they were like 1 hour or longer in-depth interviews. And about the time that I started that, I guess in 2019, after I'd been running a little bit, I was at a meeting of Sask Books, which is the Saskatchewan Book Publishers Association I'm vice president of now. And there was somebody who presented on doing a Kickstarter to launch an anthology. And I thought, hey, I know some authors. So I started that year in 2019. I asked the authors who had been on my podcast up to that point if they would like to contribute to an anthology, and 18 of them said yes, either original fiction or nonfiction. And I ran the Kickstarter, and it succeeded, and I've done the same thing ever since, each year featuring the authors who were guests of the podcast in the previous year.
So it's a collection of, are they related stories or unrelated stories?
No, this is kind of unique in that the only connection is that I interviewed them. So in every anthology, you'll get a mixture of everything from, it might be YA fantasy in some cases, or urban fantasy, or hard science fiction, far future science fiction, near future science fiction, epic fantasy. It just depends on what the author writes. So I'm always looking for another metaphor for them. So I've called them things like a cabinet of curiosities, which was the old style of museum where collectors would put unrelated items that they were just interested in on display. And I can't remember what I used this time. I think maybe this week it was, or this time around it was potluck. But it's just the idea that you're getting all these people that I have talked to and a wide variety of stories. And if you don't like one, well, stick around. There's going to be another one coming along.
Well, how many stories are per volume?
It has varied depending on how many authors say yes. This one I think I have 24, I think, if I remember right. So it's been, the first one was the skinniest actually at 18, and most of them have been in that 20 to 25 range.
Oh, okay. But the only criteria really is that you've spoken to them and it has to be about science fiction?
Yep. It's only open to science fiction and fantasy authors. My podcast now, I talk to authors in other genres, although I still have a heavy focus on science fiction and fantasy. But yeah, because I'm a science fiction and fantasy author myself, that was the stuff I was interested in publishing. And also there's a pretty good market for science fiction and fantasy short stories. It's found readers, so that's the only connection, though.
Okay, now you said this one's going to be the last one. Why are you wrapping it up?
Well, there were a couple of reasons. One, it's a lot of work, and I'd like to do some more Kickstarters, but I'd like to kickstart other stuff, like some of my own series. I'd like to continue, maybe kickstart the next book in that. But also I changed the podcast. Beginning of last year, I went to a half-hour format with video, and because I wanted to be able to interview authors in other genres, specifically the ones that I published, because Shadowpaw Press, which has published all of these anthologies, is my publishing company, and a lot of my authors are not science fiction and fantasy, and I wanted to be able to talk to them too. And then also I went weekly for a while, although I've gone back to every other week, and that was just too many. So it just seemed like a good place to wrap it up as the podcast changed focus. That initial focus was no longer there.
How many authors do you have under Shadowpaw Press?
Oh, I don't know the exact number, but I must have about at least 20, maybe more than that.
Would you call your publishing company boutique?
Well, that's one word for it. Tiny is another.
Tiny? Well, because there's different,
Yes.
There's different ways people can publish these days. And
I'm a traditional publisher. I'm just a one-man operation, but I'm a member of Literary Press Group of Canada and a member of the Association of Canadian Publishers, and I have nationwide distribution through Lit Disco, which is a literary distribution group. So I get in, the books get into bookstores, ordered by bookstores, and all that good stuff. So I'm a traditional publisher. I'm just a very, very small one. Now, I also have a side company called Endless Sky Books, which is a hybrid publisher where the authors take more of the risk of putting the book out, but then they get more of the rewards as a result. And those books get the same distribution as my Shadowpaw Press books, but it's a different model, and that's just for the authors that are really prefer that model, and there have been some who actually did prefer that model as opposed to the traditional model.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I know there's people listening that sometimes may be apprehensive about which way to go publishing. I mean, self-publishing can be very daunting. Out of all the authors I've had on this show, I've never had one that said, oh, that was easy, when they referred to self-publishing. And going from self-publishing to a major publisher, it generally requires an agent, which probably is almost as difficult to get as the publisher. So if one comes to you who has a smaller operation, and then you mentioned hybrid, tell me the difference between Shadowpaw and your other one.
Well, in a traditional publisher like Shadowpaw Press, the author pays nothing. I take all the risk. I pay all the expenses for book design and printing and all of that up front, and then the author gets, I can't afford to offer advances, but the authors get competitive royalties, what's fairly standard, which is currently about, I think it's 8% of cover price is what I'm offering on the trade paperbacks and 30% on ebooks. I think that's what it is. The contract has changed over time, but it's something in that ballpark. So in that case, I'm taking all the risk, and I'm taking on an author that I think I can sell enough books to make that worthwhile. On the hybrid side, the author pays up front for the editing costs and book design and cover design and all of that. Most of that is editing time, my editing time. And then they'll also cover the initial print run. However, on the other side of it, I only take a small management fee, and they get the bulk of any sales. So that's kind of the difference. In traditional publishing, the publisher takes all the risk. In hybrid publishing, the author takes some of the risk. What I offer on the hybrid side is that my hybrid publishing, Endless Sky Books, is distributed as an imprint of Shadowpaw Press. So even though it's done under that model, well, first of all, it's just as competitive. I only take things that I really would publish anyway under Endless Sky Books. It's not a vanity press by any means. And it gets the same editing and attention from me, and it gets the same attention from my distributor and the sales force that I'm part of as being a member of Literary Press Group. So there are actual sales reps that go out to bookstores and push these books. So that's my model. There are many, many, many other models, but that's what I've ended up with, is these two sides. I have been doing a lot of reprints, and I'm moving those to Endless Sky Books because I've discovered there just isn't much market for reprints on the traditional side. But I have published a number of reprints, books that were orphaned by another publisher, and I thought they still deserved a chance to be out there, so I put them out there. There was one publisher here in Saskatchewan, DAW Books, that had published a 5-book YA fantasy series of mine, and very well-known literary publisher. And after 40 years, they went bankrupt, and so there were a number of orphaned, award-winning books from them that I've put out new editions of. And so, yeah, it's all. I'm an extremely eclectic publisher. I publish everything from poetry to children's books to YA to fantasy to science fiction to literary fiction and a little bit of nonfiction. So I'm not quite sure how I ended up doing this. I put out 20 books all by myself last year, which is a lot. And, talk about self-publishing being a lot of work. Well, traditional publishing is even more. But somehow I got all these books out last year, and I'm cutting back a bit, but I have at least 8, I think, planned for this year.
Well, was there any particular reason why you started your own publishing? I assume you were an author prior to that, right?
Oh yeah, I'm an author. My elevator pitch is I'm the award-winning author of more than 60 books of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction for readers of all ages. My main publisher for many years, 12 novels with DAW Books in New York, one of the major science fiction imprints. Nonfiction, I've written everything under the sun for a lot of educational publishers, a lot of local publishers, history books, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm very much an author. I still think of myself primarily as an author. But back in 2018, I had finally collected, I don't write a lot of short stories, but I had finally written enough that I had enough for a collection, and I decided to put that out, and I was just going to self-publish it. And then I also had my grandfather-in-law's First World War memoirs, and I wanted to put them out in a little book and to get them out in time for the centennial of the armistice that year. And I was just going to put that out as if I were a self-publisher, but then I talked to a local publisher who said, no, you should start your own publishing company. And I did, and that's how it got started. At first, I was it was just print on demand and ebooks, and I was just focused on a lot of my own stuff that had come back to me from other publishers that had gone under, like Kato Books. But then I picked up, somebody said, well, I have this book, would you be interested in it? And I started these anthology series, so all of a sudden I was publishing other authors, and from that has grown where I am now with, as I said, 20 to 30 authors, I think, that I've published now, and more coming.
You mentioned something in there that I wanted to bring up because somebody else mentioned this last week, and I hadn't heard of it. It was print on demand. Now, is that something that like if you self-publish on Amazon, is that how they would do it, is print on demand?
Yeah. Print on demand is just a technology. Instead of printing a whole bunch of books on a big run of, it could be thousands for a major publisher, you just print as they're ordered. So on Amazon, if you're using their print on demand service, which I use actually, I have a whole mix of technologies I use to produce my books, but I use that for the Amazon orders because that way it always shows in stock. They literally print that book when you order it and send it out to you, and it only takes very short time. There's also Ingram, which has Ingram Spark, which is another print-on-demand service. So that's really good for authors who want to have a print copy of a self-published book. You can go through those, and you can also get more distribution of the book that way as well.
So what's the downside to that?
It's a bit more expensive per copy.
Okay.
If you do a big print run, your per unit cost drops dramatically. On the other hand, you might have 2,000 books and you can only sell 100 of them. So that doesn't work. I actually use something that's kind of in between because my print runs are small, typically 200 or 300 at the top end. There's a company here that does short runs, so it's not print on demand, but they're willing to do very small runs of like 24 books or more. Now again, the price per unit drops the more books you print, but that's a way to just print what I need without having a huge number that I put money into that I'll never get back because they're not selling.
Well, I think people that sell T-shirts and merchandise do that as well because they don't want to get stuck with 500 various assorted T-shirts with their name on it. The reason to do those bigger runs is literally if you know you can sell a lot of books, then you can make more money because you spent less money printing each unit. Yeah. Okay.
If you're only selling a few books, you just have to look at the numbers and decide what works best.
Well, that makes sense. So Shapers of the World Volume 5 has been released, and I see March 25th was released, yeah?
Yep, it's pretty new.
And, I guess that's about it. Do you have anything else you want to add or give out your websites?
Oh, well, I'll do that for sure. If you'd like to check out Shadowpaw Press, it's Shadowpaw Press, all one word, .com, named after our black Siberian cat, Shadowpaw. His picture's on every book, even though he's absolutely no help. And you can check me out at edwardwillett.com. That's just 2 T's on Willett, edwardwillett.com. And then on all the socials, I'm on a bunch of them under various handles, but you can find me all over the place.
Okay. Well, always nice to have you back on the show, Ed, and best of luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you.